about getting a square deal. So I went to a New York stock exchange house that had a branch at home where I knew some of the clerks. They have long since gone out of business. I wasn't there long, didn't like one of the partners. And then I went to A.R. Fullerton and Company. Somebody must have told them about my early experiences, because it was not long before they all got to calling me the boy trader. I've always looked young. It was a handicap in some ways, but it compelled me to fight for my own, because so many tried to take advantage of my youth. The chaps at the bucket shops, seeing what a kid I was, always thought I was a fool for luck, and that was the only reason why I beat them so often. Well, it wasn't 6 months before I was broke. I was a pretty active trader and had a sort of reputation as a winner. I guess my commissions amounted to something. I ran up my account quite a little, but of course, in the end, I lost. I played carefully, but I had to lose. I'll tell you the reason. It was my remarkable success in the bucket shops. I could beat the game my way only in a bucket shop, where I was betting on fluctuations. My tape reading had to do with that exclusively. When I bought, the price was there on the quotation board, right in front of me. Even before I bought, I knew exactly the price I'd have to pay for my stock. And I always could sell on the instant. I could scalp successfully, because I could move like lightning. I could follow up my luck or cut my loss in a second. Sometimes, for instance, I was certain a stock would move at least a point. Well, I didn't have to hog it. I could put up a point margin and double my money in a jiffy. Or I'd take half a point on 100 or 200 shares a day. That wouldn't be bad at the end of the month, would it? The practical trouble with that arrangement, of course, was that even if the bucket shop had the resources to stand a big, steady loss, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't have a customer around the place who had the bad taste to win all the time. At all events, what was a perfect system for trading in bucket shops didn't work in Fullerton's office. There I was, actually buying and selling stocks. The price of sugar on the tape might be 105, and I could see a 3-point drop coming. As a matter of fact, at the very moment the ticker was printing 105 on the tape, the real price on the floor of the exchange might be 104 or 103. By the time my order to sell 1,000 shares got to Fullerton's floor man to execute, the price might be still lower. I couldn't tell at what price I had put out my 1,000 shares until I got a report from the clerk. When I surely would have made 3,000 on the same transaction in a bucket shop, I might not make a cent in a stock exchange house. Of course, I have taken an extreme case. But the fact remains that in A.R. Fullerton's office, the tape always talked ancient history to me, as far as my system of trading went, and I didn't realize it. And then, too, if my order was fairly big, my own sale would tend further to depress the price. In the bucket shop, I didn't have to figure on the effect of my own trading. I lost in New York because the game was altogether different. It was not that I was now playing it legitimately that made me lose, but that I was playing it ignorantly. I have been told that I'm a good reader of the tape, but reading the tape like an expert did not save me. I might have made out a great deal better if I had been on the floor myself, a room trader. In a particular crowd, perhaps I might have adapted my system to the conditions immediately before me. But, of course, if I got to operating on such a scale as I do now, for instance, the system would have equally failed me on account of the effect of my own trading on prices. In short, I did not know the game of stock speculation. I knew a part of it, a rather important part, which has been very valuable to me at all times. But if with all I had I still lost, what chance does the green outsider have of winning, or rather of cashing in? It didn't take me long to realize that there was something wrong with my play, but I couldn't spot the exact trouble. There were times when my system worked beautifully, and then all of a sudden, nothing but one swat after another. I was only 22, remember. Not that I was so stuck on myself that I didn't want to know just where I was at fault, but at that age, nobody knows much of anything. The people in the office were very nice to me. I couldn't plunge as I wanted to because of their margin requirements. But old A.R. Fullerton and the rest of the firm were so kind to me that after 6 months of active trading, I not only lost all I had brought and all that I had made there, but I even owed the firm a few hundreds. There I was, a mere kid, who had never before been away from home, flat broke. But I knew there wasn't anything wrong with me, only with my play. I don't know whether I make myself plain, but I never lose my temper over the stock market. I never argue with the tape. Getting sore at the market doesn't get you anywhere. I was so anxious to resume trading that I didn't lose a minute, but went to old man Fullerton and said to him, "Say, AR, lend me $500. "What for?" says he. "I've got to have some money." "What for?" he says again. "For margin, of course," I said. $500, he said and frowned. You know they'd expect you to keep up a 10% margin, and that means $1,000 on 100 shares. Much better to give you a credit. "No," I said, "I don't want a credit here. I already owe the firm something. What I want is for you to lend me $500 so I can go out and get a roll and come back." "How are you going to do it?" asked old AR. "I'll go and trade in a bucket shop," I told him. "Trade here," he said. "No," I said, "I'm not sure yet I can beat the game in this office, but I am sure I can take money out of the bucket shops. I know that game. I have a notion that I know just where I went wrong here." He let me have it, and I went out of that office where the boy terror of the bucket shops, as they called him, had lost his pile. I couldn't go back home because the shops there would not take my business. New York was out of the question. There weren't any doing business at that time. They tell me that in the Goes, Broad Street and New Street were full of them, but there weren't any when I needed them in my business. So after some thinking, I decided to go to St. Louis. I had heard of two concerns there that did an enormous business all through the Middle West. Their profits must have been huge. They had branch offices in dozens of towns. In fact, I have been told that there were no concerns in the East to compare with them for volume of business. They ran openly and the best people traded there without any qualms. A fellow even told me that the owner of one of the concerns was a vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, but that couldn't have been in St. Louis. At any rate, that is where I went with my $500 to bring back a stake to use as margin in the office of A.R. Fullerton and Company, members of the New York Stock Exchange. When I got to St. Louis, I went to the hotel, washed up, and went out to find the bucket shops. One was the J.G. Dolan Company, and the other was H.S. Teller and Company. I knew I could beat them. I was going to play dead, safe, carefully, and conservatively. My one fear was that somebody might recognize me and give me away, because the bucket shops all over the country had heard of the boy trader. They're like gambling houses and get all the gossip of the professionals. Dolan was nearer than Teller, and I went there first. I was hoping I might be allowed to do business a few days before they told me to take my trade somewhere else. I walked in. It was a whopping big place, and there must have been at least a couple of hundred people there staring at the quotations. I was glad, because in such a crowd I stood a better chance of being unnoticed. I stood and watched the board and looked them over carefully until I picked out the stock for my initial play. I looked around and saw the order clerk at the window, where you put down your money and get your ticket. He was looking at me, so I walked up to him and asked, "Is this where you trade in cotton and wheat?" "Yes, Sonny," says he. "Can I buy stocks too?" "You can if you have the cash," he said. "Oh, I got that all right," I said like a boasting boy. "You have you?" he says with a smile. "How much stock can I buy for $100? I asked, peeved alike. "100, if you got the 100. "I got the 100, yes, and 200 too," I told him. "Oh my," he said. "Just you buy me 200 shares," I said sharply. "200 what?" he asked, serious now. It was business. I looked at the board again, as if to guess wisely, and told him, 200 Omaha. "All right," he said. He took my money, counted it, and wrote out the ticket. "What's your name?" he asked me, and I answered, "Horace Kent." He gave me the ticket, and I went away and sat down among the customers to wait for the roll to grow. I got quick action, and I traded several times that day. On the next day, too. In 2 days, I made $2,800, and I was hoping they'd let me finish the week out. At the rate I was going, that wouldn't be so bad. Then I'd tackle the other shop, and if I had similar luck there, I'd go back to New York with a wad I could do something with. On the morning of the third day, when I went to the window, bashful-like, to buy 500 BRT, the clerk said to me, "Say, Mr. Kent, the boss wants to see you." I knew the game was up, but I asked him, "What does he want to see me about?" I don't know. Where is he? In his private office. Go in that way. And he pointed to a door. I went in. Dolan was sitting at his desk. He swung around and said, "Sit down, Livingston." He pointed to a chair. My last hope vanished. I don't know how he discovered who I was, perhaps from the hotel register. "What do you want to see me about?" I asked him. "Listen, kid, I ain't got nothing against you, see? Nothing at all, see?" "No, I don't see," I said. He got up from his swivel chair. He was a whopping big guy. He said to me, "Just come over here, Livingston, will you?" And he walked to the door. He opened it, and then he pointed to the customers in the big room. "Do you see 'em?" he asked. "See what?" "Them guys. Take a look at 'em, kid. There's 300 of 'em. 300 suckers. They feed me and my family, see? 300 suckers. Then ye come in, and in 2 days ye cop more than I get out of the 300 in 2 weeks. That ain't business, kid, not for me. I ain't got nothing against you, kid. You're welcome to what you got, but you don't get any more. There ain't any here for you. Why, that's all. I seen you come in the day before yesterday, and I didn't like your looks. On the level, I didn't. I spotted you for a ringer. I called in that jackass there," he pointed to the guilty clerk, "and asked what you done. And when he told me, I said to him, I don't like that guy's looks. He's a ringer. And that piece of cheese says, ringer my eye, boss. His name is Horace Kent, and he's a rah-rah boy playing at being used to long pants. He's all right. Well, I let him have it his way. That blankety-blank cost me $2,800. I don't grudge it, you, my boy, but the safe is locked for you." "Look here," I began. "You look here, Livingston," he said. "I've heard all about ye. I make my money coppering suckers' bets, and you don't belong here. I aim to be a sport, and you're welcome to what you pride off in us, but more of that would make me a sucker, now that I know who you are. So toddle along, sonny." I left Dolan's place with my $2,800 profit. Teller's place was in the same block. I had found out that Teller was a very rich man who also ran up a lot of pool rooms. I decided to go to his bucket shop. I wondered whether it would be wise to start moderately and work up to 1,000 shares, or to begin with a plunge on the theory that I might not be able to trade more than one day. They get wise mighty quick when they're losing, and I did want to buy 1,000 BRT. I was sure I could take 4 or 5 points out of it. But if they got suspicious or if too many customers were long on that stock, they might not let me trade at all. I thought perhaps I'd better scatter my trades at first and begin small. It wasn't as big a place as Dolan's, but the fixtures were nicer, and evidently the crowd was of a better class. This suited me down to the ground, and I decided to buy my 1,000 BRT. So I stepped up to the proper window and said to the clerk, "I'd like to buy some BRT. What's the limit?" "There's no limit," said the clerk. "You can buy all you please if you've got the money." "Buy 1,500 shares, I says, and took my roll from my pocket while the clerk starts to write the ticket. Then I saw a red-headed man just shove that clerk away from the counter. He leaned across and said to me, "Say, Livingston, you go back to Dolan's. We don't want your business." "Wait until I get my ticket," I said. "I just bought a little BRT." "You get no ticket here," he said. By this time, other clerks had got behind him and were looking at me. "Don't ever come here to trade. We don't take your business, understand?" There was no sense in getting mad or trying to argue. So I went back to the hotel, paid my bill, and took the first train back to New York. It was tough. I wanted to take back some real money, and that teller wouldn't let me make even one trade. I got back to New York, paid Fullerton his $500, and started trading again with the St. Louis money. I had good and bad spells, but I was doing better than breaking even. After all, I didn't have much to unlearn, only to grasp the one fact that there was more to the game of stock speculation than I had considered before I went to Fullerton's office to trade. I was like one of those puzzle fans, doing the crossword puzzles in the Sunday supplement. He isn't satisfied until he gets it. Well, I certainly wanted to find the solution to my puzzle. I thought I was done with trading in bucket shops, but I was mistaken. About a couple months after I got back to New York, an old jigger came into the Fullerton's office. He knew AR. Somebody said they'd once owned a string of racehorses together. It was plain he'd seen better days. I was introduced to old McDevitt. He was telling the crowd about a bunch of Western racetrack crooks who had just pulled off some skin game out in St. Louis. The head devil, he said, was a pool room owner by the name of Teller. What Teller? I asked him. Hi, Teller. H.S. Teller. I know that bird, I said. He's no good, said McDevitt. He's worse than that, I said. And I have a little matter to settle with him. Meaning how? The only way I can hit any of these short sports is through their pocketbook. I can't touch him in St. Louis just now, but someday I will. And I told McDevitt my grievance. Well, says old Mac, he tried to connect here in New York and couldn't make it. So he's opened a place in Hoboken. The word's gone out that there is no limit to the play, and that the house roll has got the Rock of Gibraltar faded to the shadow of a bantam flea. What sort of a place? I thought he meant pool room. Bucket shop, said McDevitt. Are you sure it's open? Yes, I've seen several fellows who've told me about it. That's only hearsay, I said. Can you find out positively if it's running, and also how heavy they'll really let a man trade? Sure, Sonny, said McDevitt. I'll go myself tomorrow morning and come back here and tell you. He did. It seems Teller was already doing a big business and would take all he could get. This was on a Friday. The market had been going up all that week. This was 20 years ago, remember. And it was a cinch the bank statement on Saturday would show a big decrease in the surplus reserve. That would give the conventional excuse to the big room traders to jump on the market and try to shake out some of the weak commissioned house accounts. There would be the usual reactions in the last half hour of the trading, particularly in stocks in which the public had been the most active. Those, of course, also would be the very stocks that Teller's customers would be most heavily long of, and the shop might be glad to see some short selling in them. There's nothing so nice as catching the suckers both ways, and nothing so easy with 1-point margins. That Saturday morning, I chased over to Hoboken to the Teller place. They had fitted up a big customer's room with a dandy quotation board and a full force of clerks and a special policeman in gray.